What if the reason your life feels boring has nothing to do with your circumstances and everything to do with how you're showing up to it? Let me tell you something that might sting a little. Your life is not boring. You have made it boring. And the most liberating part of that truth is this: if you made it boring, you can make it extraordinary. Not next year, not when you get the promotion, not when you finally travel abroad. Right now, today, in this exact moment, with exactly what you have. Most of us are walking through our days like passengers on a bus we didn't choose to ride. We wake up, scroll, work, eat, scroll again, sleep, and repeat. We call this living, but this is not living. This is surviving on autopilot. And autopilot, no matter how comfortable it feels, will always deliver you to the same destination. A life that feels empty, dull, and somehow incomplete, no matter what you achieve in it. The single greatest secret to an interesting life is not money, it is not travel, it is not adventure or novelty or some dramatic identity overhaul. It is participation. Active, intentional, wholehearted participation in your own life. When you eat a meal, truly taste it. When someone speaks to you, truly hear them. When you walk down a street, truly see it. That is the entire shift, and it costs nothing. I once sat down to eat a simple meal: eggs, some vegetables, a salad, nothing special. But before I took the first bite, I paused and thought about the person who cooked it. I imagined them as someone who had followed their passion, who had dedicated years to learning their craft, so that someone like me could sit down and eat something this beautiful. That one thought turned a forgettable lunch into a moment I genuinely treasured. That is what participation looks like. That is the difference between a life that feels magical and a life that feels like nothing. One of the biggest enemies of joy in modern life is nonchalance. Somewhere along the way, we decided that being cool meant being unmoved, that being sophisticated meant never being too excited, that being mature meant suppressing wonder. So we walk past rivers without looking at them. We eat extraordinary food without tasting it. We receive kindness without acknowledging it. We have been so busy trying to look like nothing impresses us that we have accidentally trained ourselves to be impressed by nothing, and then we wonder why everything feels flat. When I walk past water, even a fountain, even a puddle after rain, I stop and think, that is water. That is actual water. Something that has existed for millions of years, something that every living thing on this planet depends on, and it is right here in front of me right now. Some people would read that and laugh, but here is what I know. A person who cannot find water fascinating will struggle to find anything fascinating, and a life where nothing is fascinating is a very sad life, regardless of what is in your bank account. Notice where you have gone neutral. That word, neutral, is important. Neutral is not peace. Neutral is not calm. Neutral is the slow death of your capacity to feel joy. It happens gradually. One day you stop noticing sunsets. Then you stop noticing good food. Then you stop noticing kindness. Then you stop noticing anything at all, and you start wondering why life feels so empty. The antidote is not to force fake excitement. It is to genuinely reconnect, to look at ordinary things with fresh eyes, to ask questions again, to be curious again, to allow yourself to be moved again. There's a concept I want to introduce you to called micro-risk. It sounds technical, but it is beautifully simple. Micro-risk is the small, slightly uncomfortable thing you could do in any given moment, but usually do not because you are afraid of looking silly or being rejected. One evening, I went downstairs to collect my groceries and ran into a neighbor I had never met before. He was in his bathrobe, clearly embarrassed, clearly hoping to disappear. And I could have done what most people do: stared at my phone, looked at the ceiling, pretended not to notice. Instead, I looked at him and burst out laughing and told him exactly why. He laughed too. We had a brief, warm, completely human moment. That is micro-risk, and it cost me nothing except the willingness to be a little bit vulnerable. Maybe you see a stranger with the same phone case as you. Cross the street and tell him.
Maybe a colleague did something that genuinely impressed you. Say it out loud instead of just thinking it. Maybe there's a thought you've been keeping to yourself in a conversation because you're not sure how it will land. Try saying it. None of these things will blow your life up, but each one of them pulls you out of autopilot and into the present moment. Each one creates a small flash of real connection, and those small flashes, accumulated over days and weeks and years, are what make a life feel rich. Speaking of autopilot, most of us react to our days rather than responding to them. A reaction is automatic, unconscious, the same answer you have given 1,000 times before. A response is deliberate. It requires you to pause, even for half a second, and make a choice. When you react, you are a machine. When you respond, you are a person. The practice of choosing your responses instead of defaulting to your reactions is one of the most powerful things you can do to make your life feel more alive. Because the moment you start crafting your responses, you are no longer sleepwalking. You are present. You are awake. And awake people have interesting lives.
Now let us talk about the trap that keeps so many people stuck in a life that never quite feels like enough. It is the when and then game. When I get the raise, then I will be happy. When I lose the weight, then I will feel confident. When I travel, then I will feel free. When the kids are older, when I buy the house, when the timing is right, then my life will truly begin. But here's the brutal truth about that game. The then never comes. Because happiness is not a destination that circumstances deliver you to. It is a practice. It is something you do with what you have where you are right now. People who do not know how to find joy without a salary raise will not know how to find it with one. The skill has to be built in ordinary life, or it will never exist. And while we are dismantling myths, let us address the biggest one of all. Money does not make life interesting. I want to be clear, money matters. Pay your bills, take care of yourself, build financial security. None of that is small. But money without the ability to be present, to connect, to wonder, to participate, that is just an expensive version of emptiness. There are people in this world with more wealth than most of us will ever see who are desperately, profoundly unhappy. They have every external resource and no internal one. And there are people with very little who live with extraordinary richness because they have mastered the art of being alive to their own experience. Money amplifies who you already are. If you are someone who cannot find beauty in a simple day, more money will only take you to more expensive places where you will find the same nothing. Something else that quietly destroys an interesting life is the habit of outsourcing your preferences to culture. We spend so much of our lives chasing what we have been told is interesting, impressive, or worthwhile, that we never stop to discover what actually moves us personally.
Personally, maybe you love watching old films alone on a Saturday night. Maybe you find deep joy in growing things. Maybe you are endlessly fascinated by maps or languages or obscure history or cooking techniques. Maybe silence is what genuinely restores you, not parties. These are not lesser pleasures. These are your pleasures. And the life that is built around your authentic pleasures is infinitely more interesting than the one you're performing for other people's approval. Find what makes you tick. Track it, protect time for it, and stop apologizing for it. There is also a way to stay young that has nothing to do with your body and everything to do with your mind. I once knew an older woman whose company felt electric. She was curious about everything. She laughed easily. She found people endlessly interesting. She still got excited about small things. A good cup of tea, an unexpected kindness, a beautiful cloud formation. She once told me that inside, she felt no different from when she was young. She said the body ages whether you like it or not, but the spirit only ages if you allow wonder to drain out of it. That conversation stayed with me, because she was right. The people who remain alive inside for their whole lives are not the ones who find the biggest adventures. They are the ones who never stopped paying attention to the small ones. So, here is what I am asking you to do. Not next week, today. The next meal you eat, slow down and actually taste it. The next person you speak to, actually look at them. On your way home today, put the phone away and notice 5 things you have never noticed before on that same route you take every single day. Tonight, before you sleep, write one sentence about one good moment from today, no matter how small it seems. These are not grand gestures. They are the beginning of a practice. And that practice, sustained over time, will transform the texture of your entire life. You do not need a new identity. You do not need a new city. You do not need a different body, a fatter wallet, or a more dramatic story. You need more contact with the life you are already living. More presence, more wonder, more willingness to participate fully in the ordinary moments that make up the majority of your days. Because the extraordinary life you are waiting for is not somewhere ahead of you. It is here, right now, in every small, overlooked, underappreciated moment that you have been walking past without stopping. Wake up to it. It is yours.
That muscle is almost completely atrophied. Not because they are bad people or shallow people, but because nothing in the modern environment rewards presence. Everything rewards distraction. So you have to make the choice to go against the current. You have to decide, deliberately and repeatedly, to show up to your own life. What does that actually look like in practice? It looks like eating your breakfast without your phone on the table. It looks like having a conversation where you are not mentally composing your response while the other person is still speaking. It looks like sitting with an uncomfortable feeling instead of immediately reaching for something to numb it. It looks like walking somewhere familiar and forcing yourself to notice 3 things you have never consciously registered before. It looks like pausing before you answer someone, not because you are unsure what to say, but because you want your answer to actually come from you rather than from habit. These things sound almost embarrassingly simple, and they are simple, but simple is not the same as easy. Because every time you choose presence, you are choosing it against the pull of 1,000 other options that promise to be more stimulating, more comfortable, more entertaining. Presence asks you to be with what is. Distraction always promises something better just one click away. Learning to choose presence anyway, that is the real discipline. That is where the work is. There is another dimension to this that most people completely overlook. It is the relationship you have with your own inner world. Most of us treat our minds like a waiting room, somewhere we pass through on the way to the next external thing. We are almost never just in our own company, genuinely and comfortably. The moment we are alone and quiet, we panic and reach for stimulation. We cannot eat alone without reading. We cannot walk without listening to something. We cannot sit with ourselves for 5 minutes without filling the silence. And this constant flight from our own interior life is one of the most exhausting things a human being can do.
Learning to be good company for yourself is one of the most underrated life skills in existence. When you can sit quietly with your own thoughts, when you can be alone without being lonely, when your inner world becomes a place you actually enjoy visiting, everything changes. You stop needing external validation to feel okay. You stop being terrified of silence. You stop measuring your life by how it looks to other people. You start living by how it actually feels to you. And that shift from performance to genuine experience is what transforms an ordinary life into a rich one. Connection is the other piece of this that cannot be skipped. Human beings are wired for it at a biological level. When we feel genuinely seen by another person, when we experience real understanding or shared laughter or honest vulnerability, something in us settles in a way that nothing else can replicate. And yet we have become masterful at being around each other without actually connecting. We have surface conversations that leave both people feeling vaguely lonelier than before. We scroll through hundreds of people's highlight reels every day and feel simultaneously overstimulated and profoundly isolated. Real connection requires the same thing that real living requires: presence. It requires putting down the performance and showing up as yourself. It requires asking a question and actually caring about the answer. It requires saying something true instead of something safe. It requires allowing yourself to be affected by other people, to let their reality land on you rather than just bouncing off a polished surface. You do not need hundreds of these connections. You need a few real ones. And you build them the same way you build everything worth having, through consistent, genuine attention. The life that most people are waiting for is not going to arrive. There is no version of the future where everything is finally in place and joy becomes automatic. Joy has never worked that way, and it never will. Joy is always now, or it is nowhere.
It is always in the detail you noticed, the conversation you were truly present for, the meal you actually tasted, the evening you spent without performing anything for anyone. Start there, stay there, build from there. Everything else will follow.